Hi Soul Family, Kira Marie here. Welcome back to Remember Who the Fuck You Are So the Game Can Change, podcast that is here to wake you up, to lift you up, to trigger you possibly, to empower you and to know your worth, step into your true authentic self. So this week's episode is a doozy. This week's episode is about my journey, my truth, my dad and how he played a role in my life, or the impact that he had, both positively and negatively, and also how that impacted my journey and my soul truth with it, and the journey of the end of his life. So I'm going to break this up in two parts. Part one is my childhood and what transpired, how he played a part in that, and what come through with that. And the second part of me coming back to Adelaide, where he is, and spending some time with him before he passed away, and what that brought up. And so please stay tuned for part one and then come back for part two. All right, my loves, sending you so much love. Hey Soul Family, thanks for joining me in this week's episode, part two of my journey and my truth, my story. And then it's also episode, or part one of episode of my dad. There is going to be split into two, so stay tuned right now for part one. Let's dive in. So I am at Adelaide, and this episode is about my dad and my truth, my journey, his journey, and what's unfolded. So my dad, when we were growing up, he was just always a little different, a little strange. Back in the 80s, 90s, we were born and grew up in a small country town, but on a farm outside of the town, and was on a big acreage, hectare property that was his parents, and they were taking care of it. So the reason why we moved from there when I was, I think, in prep, is my dad had what they called a mental breakdown, and he couldn't handle being in the open spaces of the farm. So we sold the farm, moved to Adelaide, and he got a job and saw psychiatrists, and we went on our way. And over the years, other people would also comment, just he was just a little different. And I remember just my dad needing time by himself, and he wasn't connected so much with the family, and that also ran through his family and generational. His parents we didn't have a lot to do with, and that side of the family we didn't have a lot to do with. It wasn't like my mum's side of the family, where we caught up and we celebrated and we did things together, and it was just keeping up appearances with my dad's family. That's all it was. And yeah, so fast forward, when my parents split up, they separated. My dad had quote unquote fallen in love with another woman, and I didn't realise that my dad had been cheating on my mum the whole marriage. Later learned that, and he was always he was always very vain, worrying about his appearance, and also worrying about everybody else's appearance, and keeping up the appearance, really, right? So, I mean, I remember we would get carob chocolate, and for those who don't know that, what carob is, it is a very healthy, no sugar chocolate substitute. So my dad would give us that for Easter. Anyway, my childhood was, Mum was there for everything. She was team manager, she was scorer, she was there, whereas I don't remember my dad being there so much. It was always just my mum. He would come to a few things, but nothing compared to like my mum. And yeah, like I remember one moment, a very defining moment in my journey when I was a teenager, where my mum was going to training. It would have been basketball training back then because we were heavily involved in basketball, and so she was taking my brothers to training, and she said, "Did you want to come?" Or maybe it might even been a game actually. And I'm like, no, that's okay. Dad will be home soon. I'll just wait here for Dad. Time ticked. So it must have been a game because it was very late at night, and Dad still wasn't home. And so when he finally did come home, as a kid would do, you question your dad. Where have you been? Like, I've been waiting here this whole time. Like, you finished work quite a few hours ago. And instead of just explaining where he was or making up where he was, because clearly he was out with someone, by his reaction, and he was triggered, obviously, and then really got into me, stuck into me. It's the whole, how dare you question me, and it's none of your business, and the rest of it. So then in the morning, the next day, I had a friend coming over, and my dad sent my brothers out to, we had 2 blocks, so the house block, and then the block next door was a spare one with a big shed on it, and my dad sent my brothers to the shed and said, go and do stuff, and don't come in the house. He then had me sit at the table, the end of the table, but turned the chair around, so he was standing in front of me and I was blocked off from going anywhere. And then he had my mum stand behind me again, so I couldn't go anywhere, and he laid into me, not physically, but fucking emotionally, and just tore me to strips. I was crying uncontrollably by the way he was speaking to me, by the way that he trapped me, by the way that I was just asking where he was and where he'd been, and that triggered him so much, because clearly when you're doing something you shouldn't be doing is when you're triggered, right? And that is when you get on the defense or attack. So then my friend knocked at the door, and my dad told me to go and answer the door and tell him to go away. I had a thought of running away and then didn't. So that really stuck in my head of just the power trip he could have and would use. So then when I was 13, my parents separated, and then I started to see the not so good side of my father. And I'd already seen it with the last story, but then it started coming out a lot more. And he, because he wanted to get the heat off of himself, he accused my mum of cheating with the most unthinkable person to cheat with. It was just laughable. And so he was totally deflecting and trying to get the heat off himself. And because he then didn't have my mum to manipulate and to control by his own choice, by asking her to leave and manipulating her with the money, he then decided to turn to me, because I was very much like my mum, and I would stand up for myself and I would question, and I would not just sit down and take it. He then started on me and started being very manipulative, very abusive, mentally, emotionally, until there was a point where he was physically. And when I again had questioned him about some stuff, he then put his hand up against my throat and put me up against a wall. And that had been after he had said to me that he would buy me a car. I was 17. And he again was manipulating me, and that meant that obviously I'd have to go out and look for a car. And I kid you not, like 6 months into it, every second weekend, because he had his own social life he had to attend to, he would then take me out for the whole day on Saturday and take me to all these car things, and none of them were good enough. None of them were right. Even though it was my car, it was still not good enough for him. So he then finally agreed to a car, had me sign for it, and then didn't come back with the money. So they were going to take me to court for it, but then decided, actually, no, we'll just take the car back. And then that's when I confronted my dad about that, and that's when he then did the throat up against, his hand up against my throat and into the wall. And that's when I'm like, you know what, I'm out, I'm done. I don't deserve this. I didn't ask for this. I'm done. So then I walked away. Also wanted to change my name. I did not want to be known. So his last name is Schlenk, and I did not want to be known or associated with Schlenks. So I spoke to my mum about changing my name. Fast forward a couple of years, or maybe like a year, and he was getting worse and was not in a good way. And my brother went over there and had a conversation with my dad about what's going on, and it ended up being a 3-way conversation with my brother, my dad, and someone else in the room. Now, back in the 90s, this is early 90s, we knew nothing about spirituality. We knew nothing about spirits or angels or anything. There was no religious stuff in our home. There was no spiritual stuff in our home. It was not a realm that we were accustomed to or had any insight into. So when this happened, we were like, oh my goodness, like, our dad is crazy. So that embarked us on a journey of speaking to people and telling them about what's going on with Dad and what he's like. And at that stage, he also had stopped work, hadn't gone back to work, and yeah, we went to people to see what we should do, and it was advised to us that we should look at mental people to come in and assess him, mental doctors. And so we did that and had an intervention, and they decided that he was unfit and was in a bad space and needed to be committed into a mental hospital. So that is what happened. Now, clearly by my journey now and the awakening and the process and the things that I can do and my gifts, obviously have learned that he was speaking to spirit. He used to have copper wire going from the ground outside of his bedroom through his bedroom window, and he would put that around his toe. Now, understanding that's grounding. He used to talk about energy, but not use the word energy. He used to talk about people trying to make him crash his work truck and take control of his body and mind. And that is energy. That is energy taking over, and people taking over and sending the energy to them and taking their power away. Now I know that. Then I did not. And that was also his journey. I would go in and visit him in the mental hospital, and I would talk to him about stuff, and he'd be like, "No, Kira, you can't talk about that in here." I would talk to him about the other people that were in the room that he was talking to and the voices in his head, and he would clearly say to me, "Kira, you can't talk about that. They will lock you up. You can't talk about that in here." So he understood, but then he was on his journey. So the next thing that was defining for me, little did I know, I didn't know the words boundaries. I didn't know what that meant. Yet I knew what that meant. So whilst doing the right thing and the nice thing, I would go and visit my dad in the hospital and make sure he was okay and check on him and see if he needed anything, and just keep the communication open until enough was enough. So my dad would go between being nice, civil, compliant. He would talk a little bit, but not a whole lot. And then he would flick a switch. Something in him would change. He would have this energy about him that was, I want to use the word evil right now. It was soul crushing. The way he used to speak to me, the words he would use. So he would then flick a switch and he would turn into a monster. He would say to me, "I wish you were dead." He would say to me, if I wasn't born, he would be okay. He would say to me that he hates me. And whilst I knew at that moment and that time that it was the illness speaking or whatever it was. For a teenager to see her dad, who she idolised, who she loved, who she looked up to, say those things to her, to have the heart and the head connect and understand, it was tough. It was really tough. And I walked away from there deflated, defeated, crying my eyes out, bawling my eyes. And just, I got to the point where I'm like, why do I keep doing this to myself? He's lived his life. I'm just beginning to live mine. I saw my worth back then, and I had to put my boundaries up, and I had to walk away. I had to honour myself and my heart and my soul, and know that I had done nothing wrong. I had been guided to do what I did in regards to have him committed, because that was what happened. And that is a really big lesson in life, is things happen the way they happen because that's the way they were meant to happen. If it was meant to happen any other way, it would have. Peter Crome says that, and it is just so powerful and so true. We look back on our journey and we're like, I've looked back on my journey with my dad and thought, fuck, if only I knew, maybe I could have helped him. If only I knew what I know now, things would have been different. Things could have been different. But I didn't. You didn't. Whatever scenario is popping up in your mind, whatever memory is popping up in your mind right now, you didn't know any better. Otherwise you would have done better. You didn't know any different because you would have done different. It happened that way because it needed to happen that way. If it wasn't meant to happen that way, it wouldn't have happened that way. As simple as that. And that's where you can release, you can let go, you can forgive yourself. And forgive them at the same fucking time. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And I send it all back to you. I send it all back to you. And I call back my power. I call back my power from the north, the south, east and west, from all directions, time, space, dimension and reality. I call it all back to me now. Thanks for joining me in this week's episode of My Truth. Then come back for part 2. All right, my loves. Sending you so much love.